The NBA is a game of inches. Sometimes the difference between winning a championship and going home empty-handed is a mere couple of inches. However, this also applies off the court too.
If our guy is there, I bet they pick Giannis. You think?
There have been so many methodical decisions and trades made throughout NBA history that created the landscape we all know today. But just like a missed basket, or a missed free throw, or a missed game winner, these teams were inches away from creating a dynasty. Yet, it never happened, as the tiniest obstacles got in their way. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and today we're gonna take a detailed look how these teams blew their chance at a dynasty at the very last moment, and why these teams truly could have taken over the league if the smallest thing fell in their favor. Without further ado, let's begin. In the later part of Kobe Bryant's NBA career, the Lakers did reach the finals 3 times and won the championship twice, in 2009 and 10. Of course, that's all very impressive, yet they also narrowly missed out on the chance to accomplish something even greater. Let's rewind a bit to the 2007 offseason. This was a summer headlined by the Boston Celtics, who shocked everyone by initiating 2 trades to acquire perennial All-Stars Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, to join Paul Pierce in creating this iconic Boston Big Three. However, did you know, during that summer, there were plenty of other discussions and trade rumors surrounding Kevin Garnett. At the time, the Timberwolves were losing, and losing a lot. Despite Garnett's intense loyalty to the franchise, he finally gave in and requested a trade. He wanted a real shot at the title. So 3 teams were in the mix: the Suns, the Lakers, and the Celtics. The Suns dropped out of the Garnett sweepstakes very early, as the Wolves wanted both Amari Stoudemire and Shawn Marion in return, a deal in which the Suns did not feel comfortable doing. The Lakers, however, were fiercely pushing for Garnett, as they believed, according to Phil Jackson, they had a handshake agreement with Wolves owner Glenn Taylor. The proposed trade looked like this: Lamar Odom and the 19-year-old Andrew Bynum. Glenn Taylor stated, quote, "Odom I was a little afraid of. I thought Bynum was gonna be a star. It became the Lakers and it became Boston, and they both said, what does Garnett want to get paid? And I told them what he wants to get paid, and those 2 teams said they would do it." So it seems like both the Lakers and Celtics were in the running for KG up until the very last moment. What exactly caused Garnett to choose Boston instead of LA? Well, it was a phone call. Well, several phone calls. Reportedly, Garnett tried to call Kobe, his longtime friend, to talk about this incredible opportunity to play with each other. 2 high schoolers who came in around the same time, both of whom reached the pinnacle of NBA stardom, both of whom have this insane, tough killer mentality that cannot be replicated. It would be a great story if these 2 superstars teamed up to ignite the start of another dynasty in LA. So he gave him a call. He gave him another call. He gave him another call, and another, and another, and another. No answer. Garnett tried several times, yet Kobe could not be reached. Maybe he was too busy preparing for the new season, but he was actually doing some marketing campaign in China at the time, so he was too busy to return his calls. However, Kobe's missed calls, combined with Wolves GM Kevin McHale's efforts to convince Taylor to do the deal with Boston, that was enough for the Wolves to trade him to Boston instead of LA. Can you imagine what a Kobe-KG duo would look like? In terms of personality and playstyle, it would be the perfect fit. Kobe can focus on scoring, and KG is so good, so well-rounded to complement any superstar. The 2 of them would be absolutely the best duo in the league. The scoring, the defense, the playmaking, the killer mentality, there's no limit on the possibilities. On the other hand, if the Lakers did acquire Garnett, their roster would look very different. There would be no more Lamar Odom or Andrew Bynum, but there still might be Pau Gasol, whom the Lakers traded Kwame Brown for. So you'd have a big 3 of Kobe, KG, and Pau. Instead of 2 championships, the Lakers might have won 3 or 4, or maybe even 5. The Wolves' decision to trade Garnett to Boston instead was a last-minute move that could have gone either way if a few things went differently. Had Kobe picked up KG's calls, perhaps Garnett would have pushed harder to go to LA. It's crazy how such a minor detail could have drastically changed the course of the NBA landscape and the legacies of both Kobe and KG. Like, what would happen if Kobe won 7 championships instead of 5? How far up could he go in the all-time rankings? We'll never know. When you think of the most dominant Western Conference teams of the 1990s, your first thought might be, oh, the Houston Rockets, or the Utah Jazz, or the Phoenix Suns. But I'm gonna make the case for the less talked about Seattle Supersonics, the team who gave the Bulls their most difficult finals matchup. If things went a bit differently, perhaps it would be the Sonics who dominated the 90s, not the Bulls. In order to understand this, let's rewind a bit back to 1987.
The Seattle Supersonics select Scott Pippen of Central Arkansas.
Yes, it was the Seattle Supersonics who drafted Scottie Pippen, not the Chicago Bulls. However, around the time of draft day, the Sonics and Bulls made an agreement. The Bulls had the 8th pick of the draft that year and really wanted Scottie Pippen, but at the 8th pick, he likely would have been gone already. So they desperately called the Sonics front office and they negotiated a deal where they would select Pippen and the Bulls would select Olden Polynice with their 8th pick, the guy who the Sonics wanted. Then they trade them for each other. Pippen lands in Chicago and Polynice lands in Seattle. There's only one issue. Pippen developed into one of the NBA's best, most versatile players, the absolute perfect running mate for Jordan. Polynice, on the other hand, became arguably the biggest bust of the class. For 3.5 years, all he did was give out high fives and grab water for his teammates. The dude was a bench warmer his entire time in Seattle, until the Sonics finally gave up on him. The curious thing is, this trade was so close to not happening at all. It was heavily dependent on so many factors going the right way. Heck, it was unlikely Pippen would even be available at the 5th pick. If another team drafted him before the Sonics did, this trade would have never happened, and Pippen would have never went to Chicago. The Sonics were also pondering their decision for a long time. It took a while for the trade to come to fruition, because they thought about keeping Pippen as well. As a very young team with fresh legs, they could use a hyper-athletic wing player who can run with them, and cover their shortcomings on defense. On paper, Pippen seemed like a fantastic fit in Seattle, but the size and strength of Polynice intrigued them. Eventually, the Bulls pushed hard in the negotiations and did whatever they could to convince the Sonics to go through with it. Now imagine a decade where instead of having the useless Olden Polynice, the Sonics instead had a big 3 of Scottie Pippen, Gary Payton, and Shawn Kemp. I mean, even without Scottie, they already won like 63 or 64 games in the regular season. He would push them so far over the top. One of their biggest weaknesses of the 90s was their lack of a big defensive wing player and a more reliable secondary playmaker. Both these problems would have been solved by Pippen. Most importantly, by keeping Pippen, they would have severely weakened the Chicago Bulls, and they most likely would not win 6 championships. The Sonics were already such a dominant force without Pippen, but if they kept him, they were inches away from creating their own dynasty. Who knows how many championships they could have won? Who knows the incredible things they could have accomplished if they just held on to their own draft pick? In the summer of 2000, Tim Duncan was at the forefront of free agency. Nowadays, we all know him as a loyal superstar. When he was younger, well, that wasn't always the case. In the summer of 2000, a year after Duncan captured his first NBA title, he strongly considered joining a different team. His relationship with Greg Popovich and the Spurs organization was not as rock solid as we thought. There were plenty of times where Duncan simply got agitated with Pop. His coaching style, his hard-nosed personality was hard to deal with sometimes. So Duncan explored other options, one of which was the Orlando Magic. This story was recited and confirmed by Grant Hill, because at the time, him and Tim Duncan were both very interested in going to Orlando, and they both had the same agent. According to Hill, this is what transpired. I had New York, I had a couple other things I was looking at, but Tim, he wanted to be in Orlando if he were to leave. This meeting between Hill, Duncan, Orlando's coach Doc Rivers, and a couple of others was going pretty well, until Rivers was asked a question by Duncan's girlfriend. Can wives and girlfriends travel on the team plane? Rivers responded, "Nah, I don't allow that." Back then, most teams did not allow significant others or family members to travel with them, but the Spurs actually did. Duncan's girlfriend would travel with the team on road trips, so when she heard that Orlando was not gonna allow that, that's the exact moment everyone knew Duncan was not gonna come to Orlando. His entire body language changed, from enthusiastic to quiet and uncertain. Honestly, Doc should have just lied and said girlfriends, wives, whatever, they could travel with them, cause this single question was the difference between Duncan signing in Orlando or returning back to San Antonio. Imagine how different the NBA landscape would be. The Spurs would not be a dynasty without Duncan, while the Magic, even if we assume Grant Hill still gets injured, a duo of Tim Duncan and Tracy McGrady would for sure dominate the entire Eastern Conference. This was around the time the East was pretty damn weak, too, so they'd cakewalk to the finals every year, and they were both so young with their entire future ahead of them. Among all of Orlando's missed opportunities over the decades, this is probably the biggest one. I don't know how many titles they could have won, 2, 3, 4, maybe even more? Alas, it was never meant to be. Of every moment of Doc Rivers' roller coaster of a coaching career, this is by far his biggest blunder. What if I told you there was a very likely possibility that MJ, Hakeem, and Clyde Drexler could have all played their entire careers on the Houston Rockets, and formed, without question, the greatest dynasty the sports world has ever seen? It was the Rockets themselves who made it fall apart. In the days leading up to the legendary 1984 draft class, there were plenty of negotiations going on behind the scenes. The most active team in these negotiations was the Portland Trail Blazers, holding the number 2 pick of the draft, with so many teams desperately calling them and trying to move up the draft. One particular offer stood out. It was actually an offer the Blazers made to the Rockets. We'll give you the number 2 pick of the draft and our young shooting guard, Clyde Drexler. In return, we want you to give us Ralph Sampson. Seems like a great deal, right? In hindsight, it was. We know that Ralph Sampson's injuries catastrophically ruined his career. We know that Clyde Drexler wound up becoming the second best shooting guard of his generation. We knew that Houston could have used that number 2 pick to draft Michael Jordan, the eventual greatest player of all time. It's a no-brainer the Rockets should have made this deal, in hindsight. Except, at the time, it wasn't so clear. Drexler had just finished an underwhelming rookie season, where he had a very minor role on his team. There was also this belief around the league that after the number 1 pick was taken, which was Hakeem Olajuwon, nobody else after him was worth more than Ralph Sampson. That was the thought process of why Houston rejected the deal. Sampson was the reigning Rookie of the Year, who just put up 21 and 11, and he made the All-Star team. He truly gave off the vibe of a proven franchise superstar. Basically, rejecting this offer kinda made sense, because they already had the number 1 pick to draft Hakeem. Their Twin Towers lineup became a formidable duo prior to Sampson's injuries. The young Rockets even reached the finals in just their second season together. Nobody predicted Michael Jordan, and to a lesser extent, Clyde Drexler, would develop into the players they ultimately became. The funny thing is, even though the Rockets rejected this proposal, the Blazers kept the number 2 pick and still messed it up by taking Sam Bowie, another center who succumbed to injuries. Not only did they miss out on Jordan, but they also missed out on Barkley as well, and drafted somebody who was completely useless. For the Rockets, they had a great run with Hakeem as their guy, but if they agreed to take Portland's offer, This big three could have ran the entire league for the next 10-15 years. I'm guessing the Rockets could have had at least 8 or 9 championships, probably even more. They would challenge the old Bill Russell Celtics as the most dominant NBA dynasty of all time. I wonder just how much the league would have changed in the 80s and 90s with a team like this. Could Jordan and Olajuwon be the greatest duo ever? Or will their egos get in the way of each other? If there's an alternate reality where the Rockets make the trade, oh, get me into that reality right now. I want to see it. How ridiculous can this dynasty truly be? As close as it was to happening, we'll never know. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts on any other dynasties that were so close to forming, but something minor got in the way and it fell apart. They were inches away from something special. I hope y'all enjoyed this video, and of course, as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.